Okay, so recently I've told guys, told everybody that I've released the World Forge on Fab, Patreon, and Gumroad in our station. So I just wanted to go through, what it means to actually use the World Forge. Just an overview of its features and things like that. I'm probably not going to cover everything. There's a lot of stuff in here, but I'll try my best to give you the best, look on the primary features of it. So when you actually bring on, World Forge from Fab or any other place, you'll have your folder where it contains it. Yeah. So this is all driven through shaders, and everything is kind of set up for you just to get on with. So the first thing we want to do is want to open a map. Now, when you open it, you got a couple of maps here, but there's also a couple of maps in the add-on folder. So if I just filter for levels, sorry, let me just first go into maps here. So these are all the levels of that. But if I go into add-ons and filter for level, these are the two levels that are found in the add-ons folder. And this folder will contain the Atmosforge, World Forge Foliage, and World Forge Rock Cluster, which is, these are meshes that are using a specialized shader. This is the foliage for the World Forge, which is all nanite foliage, dynamically controlled with wind and everything like that. And we've got the Atmosforge, which is a solution for atmosphere and lighting. Now, if we go into the maps of the World Forge and we have a look here, we've got foliage, showcase, some more stuff in here. Like for example, you won't have LV test. Is something that I'm working on at the minute, but there's going to be all these maps here that you're seeing. The primary map to showcase the World Forge is the Landscape 1K. So I'll double click that to open it and show you guys just what we actually have in there. So when you open this project, it might take a bit of time to begin with because it's going to compile quite a lot of stuff. And this is actually pretty fresh that it's on my system. I just brought it on this computer from my network. So I'm going to open it, and basically we won't have any displacement enabled because this is running in Unreal Engine 5.3. So bear in mind that if it's 5.3, you will have to enable displacement through consoles. And it's the same thing for Unreal Engine 5.4. But for 5.5 and above, you can enable Nanite displacement straight into the engine. You don't have to do any configuration changes, but I'll show you how to do those anyway. So let's just open, wait for this map to load. So here we are in the map that I've opened, which is effectively a volcano map, but obviously this is an auto material. You can load up whatever texture you want. You can see in here we have some meshes into the world that are using RVT blending with this, which by the way, it's not on by default. So just, let's just get out of the way. If you want this RVT blending that you're seeing right here with these meshes where they're like combining with the environment quite nicely with the landscape, then you would have to go into your project settings in here. And then in the project settings, just type in virtual texture, and you will have to enable virtual texture support in order to get this, right? Once you do that, restart the engine, and then that will work. But look, right now, we're looking at this. We've got the Atmosforge in the sky. We've got the World Forge auto material landscape here, right? We've got these massive meshes all around that are creating a sort of a mountain range. This is using the rock clusters plus that shader. So it looks good at a distance, even on very large land masses, but obviously very good on meshes up close. So, for example, I think we were looking at some meshes there earlier. So, this is one of them right there, right? And again, you can obviously do a lot of blends here based on whatever you're looking for. But let's actually enable our nanite displacement in order to properly get the feel for the World Forge. So I'm just going to, in the INI file, the default engine INI, I'm going to show you where you can find that. So you'll have to go into your project folder and then go into the config. So this you have to do this for any project that you open the World Forge that's 5.3 or 5.4. You go into the config folder, open default engine, and this will give you this panel over here, this notepad, obviously. And then you need to add some settings right here at the end of this, right there, right? And the settings can easily be found in your World Forge folder. So if you select the landscape and double click the material here, you will be greeted with this material instance, and you can press hierarchy and then open the auto material, which will then give you this comment right here at the end of the auto material. It will give you this comment right here where it says add the following lines to your INI file. So we need to copy these and then go to that notepad file, and here right at the bottom, add these in and then just save, right? But you will now need to restart the engine, otherwise you won't see any settings. So I'll do just that in order to see the results. So now I've opened the map again, and I am going to open my shader that I had before. So we're just going to go back into hierarchy and open the shader. And now you'll see in here, we have this displacement and magnitude and center, which are very important settings to take account for. When we go back to our landscape and select it, we can actually go down here, and where you see is Nanite, just enable Nanite and build data. By the way, I have tutorials extensively covering Nanite displacement for landscapes, so feel free to have a look on my channel for those. They're some of the newest tutorials. We now are waiting for the Nanite to build. It will sometimes take a while, sometimes it will be quite instant. Just bear in mind that depending on how big the map is, this might take longer or shorter, and obviously depends on your system as well. I wouldn't recommend Nanite displacement on systems that are not capable of handling it, so you need to have decent hardware for this, to say the least. Right, so this is almost built now, and once it will do that, should be able to see our Nanite landscape now taking form. Okay, so you can see already, I don't know if you notice here, but we now have shadows, and if I go to certain angles, you can see it better. Now, you see how the camera there can clip if you get too close to it, so just be careful with that. But I'm going to switch over to a third-person character. By the way, the cinematic FPS game mode comes with the World Forge, and you also get a third-person game mode as well. So I'm just going to switch over to that and press play. And now you can see we can move around the world, and you can see that the landscape is displaced and looking really good. The World Forge does something which other landscapes don't do so well. It displaces the environment, the landscape, very well. So it combines very nicely. It just produces a lot of different sort of effects for this. It just makes things look very natural as these surfaces combine with each other. And there's a lot of things at play in here. We have the multiple layers. So just for me to explain this to you, we have one layer here that's slope based. And then there's another layer here that's also slope based. And then there's this layer and this other rock layer here that you're seeing, which is not necessarily slope based, but they can bias and combine there as well. Nothing on this landscape here is painted. Everything is actually generated by the auto material. Now we have like distance blends. So if we get closer there, the sand will change, to a closer tiling. And if you're further away, obviously the tiling is a lot bigger. You can change all of this in your, in your settings. So if I go in here, right, I need to look at what the sand layer is. So I'll go down where I've got all my materials. They're all classed as material A, B, C, D, E, F. You can change those names to whatever suits your need, but for me, I just kept them as, generic as possible. And our sand is actually on material D over here, right? So when we look at tiling, so it says tiling far, we can actually put that to, for example, 0.02, which will make the tiling, obviously different. When we get close, it will still tile again to the closest one, but if we're far away, obviously we could do this like we could do 0.1, we could do 0.01, we can also do 0.05, but you can also do 0.001, which will make the tiling like very massive. Obviously, you can't even tell right now it's that big. So I'm going to try with a 5. You can see that, right? This is how that looks from that distance. When you get close, it's a bit odd. But then you get too close and then it switches over to this. So it really depends on your application. But by default, this is 0.01. I think 0.02 actually looked quite neat as well. Now, there's a lot of options in here that we're going to go through. But let me just do another thing now. I want to spawn the foliage. So you can see here where it says MP spawn foliage and set to 0. If you set this to 1, now foliage will start to pop up. Now, all this foliage is nanite, so it will generally, with the landscape grass, it will take a bit of time for it to populate. If you build the level, obviously the foliage will always be there, unless you change something and you have to rebuild. But yeah, we've got the foliage here and it's spawning, and it's being controlled by a wind system that's global. So what this means is that we have a blueprint in here, BP foliage wind control, and this allows us to change things like wind direction, intensity, the trample intensity of the character, and things like that. So, the wind could obviously, for example, our number 2 is now blowing a bit stronger, right? And if we press play here and we allow for the foliage to start spawning around us, we should be able to see it at play as we move around. As I said, you can change these settings in real time as well, which is quite neat. So I'm just going to go a bit closer here to the foliage as it spawns in. Obviously, you can use the foliage painter if you'd like as well to add these. They're currently trying to stay away from where this lava river is, which is another sort of like mask embedded within the Worldforge auto material. And you can use this to create rivers and things like that. So you can export from Gaia or GeoGen height maps that also have fluvial data to use with the Worldforge. So as you can see here, I've got all of this happening. And if I press Shift F1 to get my mouse and then click on the wind control, I can set the wind intensity to 2 or to 3 or 4 or something like that. Obviously, you don't want to go too high because then it will kind of start making the wind behave a bit odd. So, like look at that, right? A 5. That's not too good. So you want to do a 0.5 here. For example, we can increase the trample intensity to like 30. And now as we get closer to this grass with our character, it will start trampling the foliage around, as you can see. So this is a very cheap way of doing it without having to invest too many resources. Okay, now this landscape is not manually sculpted or anything like that. It's a height map that I've generated out of Gaia. But it's working very well with something like the Worldforge. But this doesn't, this shouldn't stop you from sculpting it to whatever you like. So you can obviously do a lot of changes here. You can use height stamps. I've got a tutorial covering that as well. So there's a lot of intricate stuff that you can do. But let's have a look in the content folder and see what else we can find. So the blueprint folder for the Worldforge will contain the landscape stamp blueprint, which I covered in a tutorial on my channel if you want to know how to use that. We have the landscape grass, which is just generating grass across the map. These are not blueprints, these are more like grass types. I have a start on the PCG system, which is mostly going to be advanced in future versions. I also have the blueprint for the playable character for the first person and third person as well. Then we have the map folder. The demo here is just simply loading up the third person and first person materials. We have a material folder which contains a lot of the material effects, which is like, this is going to be for water. So you can generate here a water plane if you'd like to add that in. And then we also have the landscape material. This is the main auto material. And then these are the material instances. So I would recommend anybody that's using the Worldforge to actually take the material instances and copy those and use them for your own project rather than starting with a new material instance from scratch, because the predefined material instances are already set up. And for example, if we take the Volcano 1K one, you can just go in here into the materials A, B, and C and whatever, and just change the textures, right? Instead of starting from scratch, and then there's going to be a bunch of settings to go through. So might as well just use these ones which are predefined. Now, if we have a look over into our render configs, this is a render config that I put together if you want to render cinematics. We also have a texture folder. There's a lot of textures in here to go through for stylized, for volcano, for various different things. But this is what makes the file actually quite big on the Worldforge, because there's a lot of textures at 4K, and I think some 8K in there as well. Now, if we go into add-ons, as I said, we have the Atmos Forge, we have the Worldforge foliage. So you can see in here, there's 5 different foliage types. And we also have these clusters, which will contain 12 different meshes here that you can place around in the world. So this is going to help you to populate the world further. I mean, it's quite incredible that this auto material here does not contain any real static mesh, no set dressing apart from the foliage. And it already can achieve such an awesome look to it all by just doing these settings. And obviously the Atmos Forge is helping a lot to drive this ecosystem with effects such as fog, volumetric clouds, and all sorts of other things. So the Atmos Forge is a very complex. You can also change it in real time. So just for you to understand what I mean by this, if we press play, so we're with our character in the world here. God, look at that displacement. That looks so nice. And if we go to the Worldforge, now we can actually, with the real-time control on, we can, for example, change the light pitch of the level. So all of a sudden now we have a different light pitch, something like that, right? Now this is very dark. Okay, and we can go and do it this other way, right? So this is going to allow us to control our lighting on the environment, okay? So that's very powerful, and you can see just how nice this looks when you do it this way. Like, look at that, right? This is. I mean, I know it's my project, and I know I say it's nice and beautiful, but it is. I mean, I think it is. I think it's, yeah, I think it's great, right? Imagine to get all this detail on the floor and get it to blend so well, it would take an artist a long time to put it all together, right? For a massive map. Now, there's some other things in here, obviously. Like we could have a look at the sky over there and we could just say, well, you know what? I want to, for example, bring the cloud layer all the way up, or I want to bring it really down. So you could bring it all the way down. Obviously, we can bring it to the point where it's actually kind of meeting with our environment. Look at that. So the clouds are literally now on top of us, onto the environment. They've now collapsed into the terrain. So that's really neat. And we can obviously lift them back up if we want. But let me just reset this back to some of the default settings. And we also have quality settings. So if you go in here and you say, well, I want to use high quality clouds, then I've just enabled it and the clouds are now a lot sharper. But this obviously will come at a cost of performance. So be careful with that as well. Now, the clouds have also been released with a new thing where we've got like these sort of like local fake clouds, which is available in the release of WorldForge, which is also very nice. I'm still working on that to make it even better. Well, everything in here is blueprint control as well. So I'm just showing you a couple of settings. Like, for example, we have simple fog, which enables a simple fog in the distance that we can obviously control, right? And just make sure this is a post-process material type, so just make sure you don't go overboard. But you can also use you can also use if you don't use simple fog, you will automatically use a more advanced fog. And then you have this where it inverts the fog, so it's actually near you and not in the distance, which allows you to just kind of art control the world that you're in, right? Even more. Now, obviously, right now I'm using a brown color, but this shouldn't stop you to be able to use any color. I mean, anything, right? Um, and then we can have a look over here. Obviously, we've got the wind direction and speed. So we can change this to make the wind move a lot faster in a different direction. That's going to help out as well. Obviously, all sorts of settings onto the clouds themselves. There's like cirrus clouds, cumulonimbus, and so on. I've got multiple tutorials on the atmosphere if you want to learn how to use that. And we can also use the stratus coverage to make the entire sky, like very dark and just have a lot of clouds in them, very thick clouds. We can also load up a skybox with a night sky and so on. And all this comes in the project as well. So use it if you want. And that's about it for the atmosphere. I'm kind of gliding over this. Honestly, I've tried counting actually. I count how many options I've got in the material, in the WorldForge material, and the atmosphere, and all this combined. And I think there's over 400 settings to play with. Okay, and I'm going to try and cover everything in more videos, right? Now, some other things in here that we have, which are very interesting. Let's have a look at the auto material for the WorldForge. So what I want to do is I want to get, maybe in this area here, something like that. And let's just eliminate the foliage again. So I'm just going to despawn the foliage, foliage be gone. And you can see in here, we have some options for displacement, for example, which can, if we increase that, this will also increase the displacement level. For example, maybe you want that. We also have various different blends. We can also enable a snow layer if you want, and also water puddles. So let's just enable water puddles just so you can see what that does, because it will automatically generate landscape water puddles that are quite natural, I would say. So you can see in there, this is an example right here, and you can see it kind of flattens the area where the water puddle is spawning in order to allow it to accumulate in those areas. So that just gives a more realistic, natural look to it. But you can have a lot of this by just playing around with settings such as the, like the water fall off. So in here where it says edge contrast, you could change that. So actually, let me just have a look. You're getting closer here to the water itself, and just have a look what happens if we play around with the slope. So right now it's 12,000, but if I, for example, decrease this, you can see now the water has started to spawn a lot more, right? So it's creating these sort of like floodplains, really. Obviously, it doesn't really make much sense wherever you have lava, so just, you can paint it out if you want. But yeah, so you can see here, because it's more flat, it's just adding a lot of water. But if we then increase this to 1,500, this will just get that to detract a lot. And you can see here that it's literally detecting areas where we have shapes, and it's creating almost, I wouldn't say rivers, but you see what I mean? It's like tracing around in the environment, which just gives it a far more natural look, I would say. So that's really cool, right? And you can obviously change the color and all that of this. So, if you want your water to be, something like this, I mean, that's very shiny, but I think you get the idea of what you can do here, right? Again, very much in your control. And like I've said, you can also enable a snow layer, but just bear in mind that when you do the snow layer, it's like displacement wise, it will calculate the displacement underneath, displacement of snow, and you'll get various different changes. And you can see that when I enabled it, a massive amount of options have just spawned in. So I'll leave it to you guys to explore that, because there's a lot. Like, well, you can see it's a lot. The foliage can also be enabled with snow. So the foliage itself, which for some reason it hasn't despawned here, but it would do if you press play. The foliage can also be enabled to have snow on it, and also obviously the landscape and all these meshes in the distance as well. So let's just disable the snow layer. Just have a look at our normal landscape again. And this is where we have the auto material blending. So a lot of this is going to help you, for example, to blend between, height blend between A, B, C, so all the layers that you have. And you can also blend, like you can effectively turn on a lot of different blends here, which will allow you to get far more control as to how these layers communicate with each other. So now I've enabled pretty much all the blends there, and you might not notice it right now, but there's a lot of rich interaction going on. But if we, for example, take the B slope angle and we push this over to 45, you can now see that it's become smaller. But we can also have a look at this blend slope angle and, like do 55 or 35. Actually, if we do 35, it will take over the B slope angle. So let's just try and get that. Oh, sorry, something like 35, 37, maybe 38, something like that. And then I will turn this to about 40 or 40, 43, something like that. And you can see there we have one layer blend, two layers, three layers, and then also some more in here. So this is allowing us to have a lot more variation per slope as we do this. And then we can also have a look at the edge hardness between the D and C. So the D and C, this is the D material, and this is the C material right here. So if we, for example, put this to like 0, you can see now that it's effectively, oh, and then it crashed. Oh, I don't like when it does that. I'll just restart it. Obviously, it's nothing to do with the World Force, it's just simply the engine sometimes. Okay, we're back now. So let's just have a look here. As I said, I'm just going to turn these height blends on. But you can play around with the hardness between the DNC layer to make sure that they either merge very smoothly or they don't merge at all. So if we, for example, put this to like a 10, then the changes between this layer and this layer is going to be quite dramatic. Now, obviously, I think let me just try like a ridiculous value. So you can see now, look at that, right? It's like literally eating away into the materials. Like it's completely abrupt, which is causing this texture stretching here, which is something very common with displacement. But if we reduce our merger, you can see that it's simply receding within the sand, which makes it more natural, and you won't get that texture stretching that you saw earlier, which is really beautiful and I think very well crafted. Now, if we have a look here, we've got other areas. For example, we have a DCA merge hardness. So what this is trying to say is that this is the A material right here, this one in the center. So in case you have this blending anywhere with these other layers, you can make it so that they blend a bit nicer as well. So again, that is very important, but you do have to turn it on. So you see what I mean? Like this here needs to be turned on in order to get that. There's a lot of these blends that you can enable if you want, but just bear in mind that the more you enable, the more the performance is going to start to be affected. So right now, you can you see the difference there? Look at that, right? If I disable it, this is going to disappear. You see that? Like that, right? But then if I enable it, it's going to give us a different blend, a new blend, which is going to stamp repetition, right? This is what this nice thing about the World Forge is, right? How much of the repetition of the landscape just kind of goes away when you do things like that, okay? Now, look, it's also got like these sort of like traces going in that direction, but we can now play around with this merger. So let's just try and do it like that. I mean, look, now it's having a very protruding effect right here, which again is the texture stretching is there. I get it. It's not amazing, but we don't have to go that hard. You know, you can probably take it to like a 25, 20, maybe something like that. And so now it's gradually building into that. And look, we press play here, right? We're in the first person camera. This looks really, really nice. Look at that, right? It's no mesh. There's no mesh there. It's just the displacement itself. It runs quite nicely and it transitions very, very naturally based on a height blend. This is what I'm talking about. You have the right textures in place. You use this sort of the World Forge and you get some really crisp and interesting detail in your environment. And there's no mesh yet. Imagine once you start adding all the meshes in, all the trees, the foliage, whatever else you've got, it just builds layer on top of layer. I'm just trying to make sure that your lasagna, which that's what basically world building is one massive lasagna, okay? I'm just trying to make sure that your lasagna has a foundation that you can build on. And all of your meshes can actually, virtual, they can blend with a virtual texture system with the World Forge, so every mesh actually is in the environment and makes sense to be there. It's blending in quite nicely. So there's a lot going on here under the hood, as I said. The options in here, you'll have to explore them. There's a lot, right? And to be fair, I know this sounds more like like an ad here, but you can get this on Patreon for pennies. I mean, it's like what, $3 or something like that to get access to this. If you don't like it, just cancel Patreon after a week. I don't know, after a day, where you have the material and then you can use it. Obviously, you won't get any more updates on it, but maybe you're on the fence for it. But now we have other things, like we have this noise mask here, right? And this is also changing the entire environment. So 0.01, you can see there now the mask is too big. So this is one of the masks that's allowing these textures to spawn. So that's a bit too much. But obviously we can do something like this, which is allowing the noise to run across the landscape and allow these patches to show up. And there's a lot of these masks, right? Like, I'm just going to try and maybe 0.1. Oh, sorry, I changed something else. 0.1 or 0.2. See what I mean? It's like 0.05. Oh, 0.05. So again, I'm just playing around with the various different blends that we can get from these noises. By default, this is set to, well, actually, what was it previously? I can't remember. I believe it was a 0.03, right? So that's what this blend was previously. I'm just putting it back to that. This is a nice sort of setup. Obviously, the rivers in here can also be changed. So if you go to the river itself, to the landscape size. So if we change that to 4096, you can see now that the river is spawning on a larger map, but because the map is not big enough, this is how this river was created, okay? But at 2K, because this is a 2K map, so 2024, sorry, not 2024, 2048, now it's actually following the right path here. But you can also try 512. So now you get the same river maps multiple times. So that's how that works, okay? And we can also dry out this river if we want. It's actually quite easy to do so. So when you go in here, where you've got the flow map and stuff like that, you can actually have a look at, well, like I said, drying out the river. So for example, I'm trying to turn this flow dry noise content. Oh, trying to do it to, like Let's just try 2, 5. You can see there what's kind of happening, right? But as we do this, it also increases the emissiveness of the areas around that are not being dry. So right now you can see just how much of the river has dried out. But if we, if this is to 1, it dries a bit less, but we can try like that. And also we can turn this to 1 or maybe 0.5, and now it's completely dry, or 1.2, 1.5. You can see just how much the river can change just by playing around with these settings. And that's just one of them, as I said. So now if we actually press play here, we can have a look. This is how that river looks. And it's still moving a little bit, still panning a little bit on the texture. But we can change this, and we can change that panning so it stops completely wherever it's like completely dry. So it's not active lava, for example. Let me just have a look in terms of like the, if we go a bit further down here, just want to show you this all the way to material F, and material F is a paintable layer. So let's actually just try and paint this just so you can sort of see what happens when you paint like this layer, for example, here, and how nice it is with the displacement being turned on. So we're just going to go to paint, and I'm going to select the material F. I'm going to put this to one side, and now I'm going to paint it somewhere around here. Okay. So let's just add that in there. We'll wait for it to process a little bit, and there we go. We now have it. And as you can see, this particular layer is got displacement as well. And it actually looks quite interesting. It's got all these holes inside of it. So if we go to the Atmos Forge and now play around with the pitch, maybe something like that. And now we press play. Now you can see this texture is actually quite nice, and we can displace it. So if we go to the material F in here and we have a look at displacement intensity, we can turn that to 0.5, for example. So now the displacement is a lot higher, right, based on its displacement map. But you can always look at the offset here is like, I'm set that to 0. And you can always go into the minus direction. You can always go to like -1 or actually try minus 0.2. Might give you a bit of an effect. Yeah, it's not too good. So 0.2, 0.5, probably better, something like that. Yeah, 0.5 is probably okay. I'm just going to change the third person character again, just so we can walk on top of it and just have a look how that looks. Okay, so you can see there that the feet are still sinking within the character, within the landscape. And that's because, as of right now, Nanite displacement does not support any collisions. So hopefully this will be something that can be addressed in the future, but for now it's not. But just bear in mind that in video games, the feet of the characters go through meshes all the time. It really depends on the angle, and it really depends on your field of view and things like that in order to change that or decrease it, right? But look at these blends and how nice they are. There's so much intricacy going on, and it makes these faces here just already look very much detailed basically. But I think that's the overview that I wanted to show you guys, because that's kind of covering the overall idea. I know it's quite a, it's a lengthy video, but I wanted to cover quite a few topics of the World Forge, and the, just as an end sort of point that I wanted to, say, I am looking at building on top of this new environments. So this is the auto material, but future iterations of this project will be with biome. And ultimately, I want this to lead to a point where we have not just biomes, but actual worlds or planets and stuff that you can land on using something like this. So this is a project in development, and anybody who gets it now obviously will have all the future updates. So the auto material will be updated, and which is the base of the lasagna, remember? And then obviously future updates will add other stuff as well. And I will add into the auto material more things. And it's not like just the auto material will only have some foliage and some meshes. I'm going to add other things into it as well. I'm also going to do some texture packs that I'm going to release for free for people that have got the World Forge. So feel free to give it a go. As I said, it's on Patreon, Fab, ArtStation Gumroad, my own website as well, 3D Project Masters. So yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching, and keep creating.